Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first week in exploring psychoanalytic and psychodynamic psychology of religion. And of course, we begin with our first exploration into the classic theory of Sigmund Freud. We are then going to turn to Carl Jung's psychodynamic theory of religion, which contrasts greatly with Freud's. A few remarks to begin. We're going to be looking at four major books of Freud's. They are all from the middle to later times of his life. And it is when Freud switched from focusing on the individual psychology to looking at the individual in context of civilization. So there are earlier papers in which Freud discusses religion, and maybe the most famous is his 1907 text, Obsessive Acts and Religious Practices. And this is where he first outlines the similarities between obsessive neurosis, what today in DSM language we call obsessive compulsive personality disorder, or also some aspects of obsessive compulsive disorder, and showing how there's similarities between acts, say, of prayer and obsessions and compulsions as undoing behaviors and trying to control anxieties. That's why OCD is part of the anxiety disorders, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which comes from psychodynamic theory, differs somewhat from obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm talking in DCM, American psychology terms, to make a connection to what you might be more familiar with. Whereas obsessive compulsive disorder looks at specific obsessions and specific compulsions or rituals to undo the anxiety that the obsessive thought produces. An obsessive compulsive personality disorder is an overriding, pervasive way of being that seeks to control and have ritualistic order as a way of being in the personality structure. So it's not something specific, it's just a way of being. It's a constant personality characteristic of creating rules and rituals in order to have a sense of security in one's environment. So this first paper, 1907, Obsessive Acts and Religious Practices, all of these texts are found for free online if you look for them. The second big book, and it's the chapter 2, is dedicated to understanding this book. It happens to be probably my favorite Freudian text, Totem and Taboo, 1913. This is the text where he really goes into looking at the connection between obsessive compulsions and religious manifestations of religious beliefs. In chapter 3, we're taking a close look at his last three texts. The Future of Major Text, 1927, The Future of an Illusion. That is his text devoted to a critique of religion and religious belief. Civilization and Its Discontents of 1930, which is right up there with Totem and Taboo as my top favorite Freud books. Civilization and Its Discontents looks at the struggles between the individual's biology, desires, what we today might call biological impulses, drives, and social pressures, what today we'd call social psychology, the social pressures. And finally, the fourth book that Freud looks at, or that we look at and Freud looks at within religion, is Moses and Monotheism. And this is his 1939 text. He died in 1939, incidentally. And this text looks at the specific psychology of monotheistic Hebrewic tradition, Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition of monotheism, one God. And of course, this has particular, he describes how this has particular impact on the psychology of being, on one's personality, looking at monotheistic religious belief as opposed to polytheistic, multiple gods. So we're going to, chapter 1, the introduction, is a general overview of Freudian theory, and I provided you with my lectures that I've recorded, audio lectures that I've recorded and I've been providing for Theories of Personality course for many years, and I think they're solid lectures. I want to keep this video brief, and I would also like to impress upon you something. I've been studying psychoanalytic theory. I've been studying Freud for 20 years. It was the focus of my master's degree. Psychoanalytic theory, I studied in depth Freud, Adler, Jung, and Wilhelm Reich in my master's degree. I pursued a master's degree specifically in psychodynamic theory. I've found absolutely incredible insights in psychodynamic theory. I want you to keep in mind that you are reading theory. What is a theory? A theory, in the words of Socrates via Plato, is a useful fiction. It's not real. There's no place in you that you're going to find called the superego or the id or the ego. You're not going to find these things. These are theoretical concepts that help us to understand ourselves and others. And it turns out that it's highly effective psychotherapeutically. Rutgers, our main campus of Rutgers, New Brunswick, is one of the most psychodynamic influenced psychology programs in the country. And you will find as you go into, if you're going into being a therapist, that much of what you will learn was strongly influenced in one way or another by psychodynamic theory. That being said, there are things that I have found in psychodynamic theory, and Freudian theory specifically, that are very useful and very insightful. And I continue to explore those things. There are other aspects that I haven't found so useful, so convincing. There's a lot of Freud that's very useful. And there's also a lot of Freud that I can't find convincing. And so, like any mature thinker, what you're going to do is take that which you find interesting and explore it, and that which you don't find interesting or convincing, leave behind. You're never going to find complete agreement with any one theorist. If you're doing that, you're not thinking. So, as you approach Freud, what I don't think we can get into a serious discussion of his religious understandings of religion until you understand his personality theory. So take this week to watch the video through the Rutgers Library, The Young Dr. Freud. It's the best documentary, and it's filled with many now deceased psychoanalysts who really knew their stuff. So this is a video I carefully selected that's going to appropriately and responsibly present Freud's ideas to you. I do my best to present my reading of Freud to you in my audio lectures. And this book is, wow, I've learned so much from this book. This is now, I think, the 4th time I'm reading it. And it really is a great book. I wish I would have had this when I was starting out with Freud. It's difficult sometimes to start out with the primary source texts. When I started out with Freud, I began with reading the actual Freudian texts. This book goes through and takes out the juicy bits of the texts and condenses it down into those 2 to 3 chapters. So really take your time and read this, and you have to read, this is not easy reading. You have to read, it's college level reading. So you have to read with intention, read with thoughtfulness. It's not reading a novel. You're going to have to read, think about what you just read, go back and read the paragraph again and make sure that it's sinking in. This is not chicken McNuggets. where you can keep popping them down. This is like eating something around the bone and having to deliberately chew and take your time and digest the material. So that being said, read first 3 chapters, listen to my audio lecture on introducing Freudian personality theory. All the basics are there. Watch the video, The Young Dr. Freud from the Rutgers Library, streaming online. And I've also included the play of Oedipus Rex, which you should at least be knowledgeable of. Okay, so good luck and enjoy this first week into psychodynamic theory.